I'm going to mute when I'm not speaking.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's event, the Justice Sessions. This is Self-Care for Social Justice. We'll give everyone just another minute or two to get into the room before we get started. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. We've got a lot to talk about this afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. Again, this is the Justice Sessions, Self-Care for Social Justice, considering questions of how we can engage in activist work in a way that builds us and rather than burns us out. And today we have Dr. True Leverette and Dr. Richmond Wynn with us. I'm going to introduce both of our speakers before they get started. And just a reminder, since this isn't a webinar format, we will have some time at the end for Q&A. So please go ahead and drop your questions in the chat box. And then at the end, when we've got time, we'll go ahead and take some time for questions. So joining us today is Dr. True Leverette, an associate professor of English here at UNF, where she teaches African American literature and serves as director of Africana Studies. Her research interests broadly include race, gender, and identity in literature and culture. She has an edited collection called With Fists Raised, Radical Art, Contemporary Activism, and the Iconoclasm of the Black Arts Movement. It's going to be published in June. And she's currently working on a book project called The Mindful Classroom, Constructive Conversations on Race, Identity, and Social Justice. Additionally, True is a 500-hour certified yoga teacher who has a dedicated yoga and meditation practice that she's had since 2005. Dr. Richmond Wynn is a licensed mental health counselor and certified addiction professional. He's the director of the University of North Florida Counseling Center and an associate professor in the master's degree program in clinical mental health counseling. His research focuses on intersectionality of identity, traumatic stress, and health outcomes. And he's specifically interested in the ways in which culturally diverse lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender persons negotiate their identities and manage their health. Dr. Wynn is a community engaged professional and has a long history of volunteerism in Jacksonville. Much of his work there is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm going to turn it over now to True to get us started.
Thank you so much. And I also would like to welcome everyone. I'm appreciative that you're attending today. I appreciate my co-presenter, Dr. Wynn, and our host, Dr. Matthijs, as well. So let me share my screen as we get started. So as Dr. Matthijs said, this is a self-care edition of the Justice Sessions. So we are here to think about holistic health in terms of activist work, how self-care is really self-sustainability when we're doing the emotional, physical, and mental work that is entailed in social justice. And we know that work can be very physically taxing, it can be mentally demanding, and even emotionally exhausting. So we wanted to be thinking about ways we can take care of ourselves as we're trying to make the world a better place. We also want to help everyone resist the idea that any one of us can or should do everything. We form communities to help sustain us in the work of social justice, and we also should be taking the time to take care of ourselves in the midst of that work. So this is a justice session a little bit different from most of the others, all of the others probably, in that we're really not focusing on the intellectual side but really tuning into our bodies and to our emotions in order to be thinking holistically about our own health and our own wellness. So with that being said, I will turn us over to Dr. Wynn.
Great. Thank you, True. Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. As you said, we're not going to spend as much time in the head, if you will, and more time in the body today, but I did want to uh, just say that so overall, we're looking at how do we engage in social justice work in ways that builds us rather than burns us out. And we do have some concrete sort of head examples in our later in our reference section, and they address things like examining your own expectations of yourselves and what kind of social justice work you engage in and how much, how to balance social justice work with other priorities. Um, and in believing that we might not have time for self-care because there's so much work to do. So there's some details around those more concrete strategies in the resources section. Um, Today, we want to focus again on ourselves and how to cultivate our own healing. So we'll focus on this sort of a mind-body connection today. We believe as a part of this, as a part of taking care of yourself, it's also important to build a like-minded community. And we're doing that today with all of you. So to move us further along, I'll turn it back over to True.
There, have to unmute myself. So thank you. Yeah, so as Dr. Wynn and Dr. Matthijs said earlier, we are thinking about ways that we can build ourselves rather than burn us out. And one of those ways is simply with our breath. We need to breathe, right? So I want us to be thinking about breath itself as a source of resilience that sustains us physically, we know, as we take in that vital oxygen that nourishes all of our cells. But it's also an avenue toward resilience emotionally. So one of the things that we can think about is pausing to breathe in moments where we need to self-assess, when we need to think about what our conscious actions might be versus reactions to emotionally charged situations or conversations or events that happen in the world. So taking that moment to pause, to self-reflect and self-assess is a healthy thing to do and an avenue toward resilience. We can also recognize, of course, that breathing itself is revolutionary in a culture that doesn't value one's own life. And we need to think no further, of course, than George Floyd and his statements that I can't breathe, which we know is powerful and true, very literally in the moment, his last moments of life, but also figuratively true for those whose lives aren't socially valued. I want to share this quote from Valerie Cower that will help us think about that. For those of us who live in bodies that are denigrated by society, breathing is actually a political act. The world sends a barrage of signals that our bodies, as women, people of color, women of color, queer people, trans people, and disabled people, are not beautiful or strong or worthy of love. Taking the time to breathe, literally and metaphorically, is a way to assert that our bodies are worthy and beloved. Loving our bodies is the first and primal act of loving ourselves. So let's just take a moment and breathe that in. And I ask all of you to maybe close your eyes, take a nice deep breath, and think about what that means and what that feels like to recognize that in this world, breathing can be revolutionary because there are lives there are people whose breath is not valued, whose life is not valued. So as we're breathing that in, I've asked you to listen internally. Listen to what's going on with you mentally and emotionally, and maybe even tune into what that feels like physically, to think about how not everyone is guaranteed that breath. So listening is also an important avenue towards self-care and resilience. So we know that we have the noises of social media that are all around us. We have the news, Perhaps even there are people who didn't attend our self-care session today because they're tuned into the impeachment trial that started at the same time again today. We have the noise of entertainment. Most importantly, we have the voices of all those who need to be heard. And we know active listening to those is important, but it's also important from time to time to rest from that kind of input. I also want to point out the fact that a lot of scientific studies show that noise pollution of various types is linked to increased anxiety, depression, high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, all number of ailments. So taking time to listen to what's happening with us in what I like to call the soil of silence is an important act. Silence is generative, it's inspirational, it's potentially transformational. And I think that's probably why it's often avoided by a lot of people. We don't necessarily want to go in and hear that silence and learn what it has to teach us. And so we fill ourselves and our days and our time with noise. And of course, there are different ways we can tune into that silence. There is the formalized silence of meditation. There's the silence that happens if you're a churchgoer. There's silent moments in prayer, but there are smaller moments too. We can find silence in our cars if we choose to. We can turn that radio off. For a trip that we're taking, we can turn the radio off between one stoplight and another, for example, just a short time to feel what that's like, to have that silence. We can turn our noises off on a walk or when we're exercising, when we're doing the dishes, listen to the sounds that are there without filling that room with other noises and other distractions. So I do encourage people to find those small moments in which to practice being comfortable with silence so that that gets to be an easier avenue to tuning into oneself and listening to your own needs. So those needs that will arise and you'll become aware of more when you have that silence. They might be needs that are emotional. They might be needs that you're recognizing that you have, you feel physically tired. You need to sit, you need to put your feet up. You need to not do the dishes maybe for an hour or so. So taking the time to listen is crucial. Richmond?
I thank you, Drew. I really enjoyed your comments about silence. It's so important. And mostly I think because it gives us an opportunity not only to disconnect from what's going on around us, but to tune into our relationship with ourselves, to listen to what we're saying to ourselves, to have a dialogue with ourselves. And that is easier, that's done easier if we don't have all of the other distractions. So silence is very, very important. I think it's also important to examine the human doing versus the human being experience. Doing is probably easy for us, easy in a sense that we gravitate to it because we're oriented that way, we're trained that way from day one. And certainly as we grow through and grow up and become educated and become professionals, there is a lot to do, not to mention just to do in your everyday professional life, personal life. But then when it comes to engagement in social justice work, there is a lot to do. There are a lot of opportunities. So, excuse me, our session today is really about being, excuse me, see, my mind tricked me that time. This is about a human being and being centered, being grounded, being quiet um, as a strategy for health and well-being, but also as a strategy for being more effective in the social justice work that we choose to engage in. Um, with so much work to be done, we sometimes take on too much. We sometimes say yes to too many things and become overwhelmed. Um, we these are basically barriers that can affect our effectiveness despite our intentions. I know for me, sometimes I'm interested in a lot of things and I like to have my hands in several different pots. And I become a little bit better at setting boundaries and actually saying no. I like to highlight that I talk a lot about boundaries in my work, and boundaries are not about keeping people out. If you boundaries are really about keeping me reined in, keeping me in my own yard, if you will, keeping me from chasing the neighbor's cat. Uh, so if you think about when you talk about having healthy boundaries, it's not about locking people out of your space. It is about acknowledging, knowing and acknowledging what kind of space you need, what fences you need in order for you to maintain good health and yeah, centeredness and focus and peace in your life. At this point, I would like for you all to reflect and share with us some of the kinds of things that might get in your way of finding or maintaining balance, peace, and tranquility. And the way we're going to do that is through a survey app called Mentimeter. Some of you may be familiar with Mentimeter if you've used it in classes or presentations. It requires that you open up a new browser on your computer or go to your cell phone and go to menti.com. So if you'll do that now and go to menti.com, when you arrive at menti.com, you will see an opportunity to enter a code. The code is at the top of the screen. It is 2178595. When you get there, you'll see the question, what's getting in the way of you maintaining balance, peace, and tranquility? You can enter 3 responses, and you can also then enter another set of 3 responses if you choose. I see some responses are coming in now. Anxiety, childcare, the guilt feelings. One thing I'd like to point out about this word cloud is the words that are larger in appearance means that more than one person has entered that response. So we see that quite a few of us are experiencing work as a distraction or barrier, anxiety, wow, and other people's anxiety. That is interesting, the family's anxiety, the pandemic, of course, right? And overall stress, regardless of where it's coming from. So it's so important to have strategies to manage stress, again, no matter where it's coming from. And today's session will certainly help with that. Goals. So something to think about in terms of goals or commitments is, do you feel obligated? Are you inspired to commit to the things that you commit to? Or is it something that you think you have to do, even if you're not connected to it? Is it something that you're doing because it helps to improve your self-worth? And that may not be a problem in and of itself, but if you over rely on things outside of yourself for self-worth, then the problems start to show up. So, wow, the world sucks. Wow, okay. Very nice. Huh. I see we're still getting a few responses. Okay, thank you. Social media. Okay, wow. So look at the things that others are experiencing, some things that you might not have noticed in yourself, but someone else has put it out here for us to consider. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to come back to another Menti later in the presentation, so you might want to just leave that browser open if you choose, because you'll be able to advance to the next question once we get to it later in the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me share again. So as we just saw, a lot of us are experiencing quite a number of barriers to our peace and tranquility and sense of balance. So we wanted to turn our attention now to some simple practices that we can each engage in to help help rejuvenate, to help find the balance and the peace that we are often missing. Oops. So as we said, we were going to be thinking this today about holistic health, and holistic health is typically figured in terms of these ideas of body, mind, and spirit. So we're going to take them one at a time, starting with spirit actually, which can be, we can think about spirit in the yogic sense. We talk about prana, or energy, coming in on the breath. So we're going to be thinking about ways in which we are breathing and how the use of the breath can help change our emotional state and our mental state and our physical experience as well. So the first thing I'd like everybody to do is to just close your eyes. And this, Dr. Matthijs also leads this kind of practice in her Koru meditation classes. So this is a really valuable thing to do in terms of finding your own breath. So take one hand and place it on your chest where your heart center is, and the other hand on your belly, and just close your eyes and breathe as you are normally breathing. So don't do anything different to change your breath. Just breathe. And now take a moment and notice which hand is rising more. Is it the hand on your chest, or is it the hand on your belly? When you're ready, you can release that practice, keeping in mind which area you're breathing into more. Many people will notice that the hand on their chest is moving more, indicating really that the breath, you're focusing your breath in the lungs. And in that way, sometimes you're missing the full capacity of your breath to soothe you, to optimize your nervous system. So we can think about breathing deeply into the belly, that diaphragmatic breathing that really is helpful in terms of soothing the nervous system. So when we do that deep belly breath, we calm the sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight reaction that we typically have, and we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the one that will, as Dr. Matthijs has said, our rest and digest functions. And there are plenty of other activities that we can engage in that also do the same thing for us. So laughing is a breathing exercise that activates our parasympathetic nervous system. Meditation, singing and chanting, some of our gentle exercise practices like yoga or being with friends, all of these engage the parasympathetic nervous system. And they do so in part by stimulating what's called the vagus nerve. And that's a cranial nerve. It's really the longest in the autonomic nervous system, and it passes through the neck and services the heart, the lungs, the intestinal tract, the back muscles. It really sends major neurotransmitters from the brain to the abdomen along what is called the brain-gut axis. So it makes sense, right, that deep diaphragmatic breathing will impact our nervous system if we think about it in that way. So I'll share that stimulation of that vagus nerve has been found to reduce anxiety in people, to reduce emotional and physical pain in the body, to reduce inflammation in the body, and to increase the sense of relaxation, calmness, and positive moods. So thinking about that, we want to pay attention to engaging our deep belly breathing a lot more often than we do, especially in those moments when we find ourselves maybe too much in our heads, or feeling frazzled or distracted, or overwhelmed with certain emotions. So let's take another moment, close the eyes, and now just pay attention to your breath in the belly. So as you inhale really deeply, feel your belly rising. You can take your hand and place it back on your belly, and imagine as you inhale, you see your navel moving away from your spine, your belly coming to greet your hands. And as you exhale, feel the belly release. You can imagine your navel pulling back toward your spine. So breathe in and out into the belly several times, and try to notice any subtle changes that you might be experiencing in your mind, in your body. Maybe you feel calmer. Maybe your thoughts are quieting. You might feel more relaxed, or conversely, you might feel more energized because you might be getting more oxygen to your cells. And the last breathing exercise I want to share with everyone is called 3-part breathing. And so we are going to want to lengthen our inhalations even more. So let me just kind of guide you through this, and then we'll practice. So in this practice, we're going to be inhaling really deeply into the belly, as we just did, but then increasing that inhalation so that we're actually filling the rib cage, and then inhaling into the chest. And then when we exhale, the long exhalation, we'll release that breath from the chest, from the rib cage, and then from the belly. So take a nice deep inhalation, feel the belly expanding, and then draw that breath up into the rib cage, which you might imagine as a barrel. So try and access all 360 degrees of that rib cage. And then inhale, lift that breath up into the chest. Even the top lobes of the lungs are filling. Maybe your collarbone rises a little. As you exhale, release that breath from the chest, from the rib cage, and from the belly. Again, at your own pace, inhaling and exhaling in those 3 parts. At the bottom of your next exhalation, you can release that practice. And again, tune in to how you're feeling in your body and your mind. And I do encourage you throughout the day to take time to tune into your breath, to pay attention. Are you breathing into your belly, or are you breathing into your lungs more? What would be better for you in that moment? So keep in mind as well that you can change your breathing pattern in order to gain more energy or in order to gain more relaxation. So for example, if you're feeling stressed and need to relax, then you might try making your exhalations longer than your inhalations, maybe counting. And conversely, if you need more energy, then take nice deep inhalations, maybe counting up to 4, and then exhale shorter exhalations. So you have these practices to help you determine and make conscious choices about how to experience the moments that you're in.
So Drew, am I supposed to be feeling a little lightheaded?
Well, you might be getting a lot more oxygen than you were before. Hopefully that lightheadedness is an energized feeling, is a euphoric feeling for you, Richmond.
It is. I think I'm onto something here. I in my counseling past, I've worked with people who have substance use disorders, and that's one of the things I always share with them is that, hey, there's a free way to get a little lightheaded, and it also can help you in other ways, and won't show up on a drug test. So. um, I love the focusing on breathing. Anybody who knows me know I'm always asking people, are you breathing? Are you breathing? And I have reminders both in my office and here at home. I have a placard on my wall just simply just says breathe. I have coffee mugs that say breathe and other things, because it's so important. We can go through our day to day and we don't realize that we're not breathing. And I don't mean obviously the stuff that keeps your organs functioning, but the breathing that we just did. And if you think about times when you have been through something that might have been challenging or stressful, what's the first thing we typically do? We exhale because we've been holding our breath the whole time. Well, thank you for that. I want to talk a little about do an exercise actually about just really focuses on quieting the mind. And as we've already identified that, there can be so much going on up here. One of my meditations from Buddhist tradition is to think about, or to actually to write down just anything that comes to mind. Don't even put any real structure around it, just to see anything that comes to mind. Give yourself a defined amount of space and just see what's in there. And just write down, and no judgment, just write it down and to see. You might be surprised at kind of all the stuff that we're holding on to up here. This meditation is called a 5 senses meditation. And it's a quick mindfulness exercise, and it can be used at any time you're feeling the need to center yourself. You need to step outside of that racing mind. If there's some emotional frustration or confusion, it can be a way to come back to gratitude. So what I want you to do, I'm going to give you some prompts, and I'm not going to give you a lot of time. So I don't want you to, again, I don't want you to be in your head about this and think too much. So let's begin. So silently notice 5 things you see in your current environment. Shift your awareness to 4 things you feel tactily. It could be the feel of air moving across your skin, the texture of clothing under your fingertips, your toes wiggling, touching your shoes or the floor. 4 things you feel. Now become aware of 3 things you hear. And notice 2 things you smell. Now observe 1 thing you taste. And you might need to take a sip of a drink or a bite of food in order to activate this sense. 1 thing that you taste. Hopefully, by practicing the 5 senses meditation, you can come out of your head, become more grounded back into the present, and be more calm, centered, and even focused. So we're going to move now into, we've been in the spirit, we've been in the mind, we're going to the body now. True?
Thank you. So I'll just qualify that please do what feels best for your body. Your body is your best teacher when it comes to what's accessible and what feels healthy for you in any moment and on any day. So I'll be leading us in some larger movements, but I think Richmond, you'll start us off with some neck rolls.
Thank you. Thank you. See? Yeah, so again, do what's right for your body and your particular range of motion. So let's start with what's called neck rolls. And we want to start with the chin to your chest and move your left ear to your left shoulder. Then move your head back. Back around to the left shoulder and back to chin to the chest. Let's do another couple of movements of that. Left ear to the left shoulder, head back, go around right ear to the right shoulder, chin to the chest. You might start with the right side. So chin to the chest, right ear to the right shoulder, head back, left ear to the left shoulder, and chin to the chest. And maybe just do and feel as much as you can, feel a stretch. Again, don't do anything that's uncomfortable or painful to you. You can modify these neck rolls in any way that helps you stretch your body and ultimately will lead to relaxation in whatever form you're able to do. You might hear some things cracking and releasing. That's a good thing. Okay. Are you breathing? Thank you.
Thank you, Richmond. So yes, I'm breathing. Feeling good with that, releasing tension. I don't know about you, but I seem to carry a lot of tension in my neck and shoulders. I think
Mhm.
that's probably not uncommon. A lot of us are sitting a lot more often than we used to for these Zoom meetings. And we've always been a bit of a car culture as well. So I think that that's not uncommon. So thank you for leading us in that exercise, which of course, as we're going through our days and we're breathing and we're tuning in to what our bodies need, we can take that exercise with us and release some tension. I'll also share, although we're not going to be doing a lot of these, pretzel kind of movements in our chairs today that are being shown in this PowerPoint slide. I will mention that in yogic traditions, youthfulness is often tied to the flexibility of the spine. So keeping the spine flexible really helps to open up neurological pathways that our brain uses to signal every other part of our bodies. So when our spine is flexible, we do feel increased energy and usefulness in the body, and sometimes even a sharpened focus in the mind. And the spine has three planes of movement. So it can move from side to side, it can move from front to back, and it can move in a twisting or diagonal way in each direction, resulting in 6 movements of the spine. So I'll just guide us in this seated position in the 6 movements of the spine to kind of wake up our energy here, and recognize you can do this even standing if that's more comfortable or feels better for you if you've been sitting too long. But again, do what feels right for your body in this moment. So we want to begin, if we're seated, sitting up nice and tall in our seats, really connecting our sits bones with the chair and really lengthening the spine here. So I'm lifting my heart here. I'm lifting the center of my chest. I feel the crown of my head moving up toward the ceiling. So the first way we'll move is laterally. So we're going to inhale and lift that right arm, if that's comfortable for you, keeping the right shoulder rooted in its socket. So that's a nice big inhale. And then as we exhale, just take the body in a crescent shape toward the left. So you can keep your head where it is. You might gaze up toward the ceiling on your right, whatever feels best for you in that moment. But do try and keep your hips grounded and evenly grounded in your chair. So there's a tendency here to kind of lift the right hip off the chair. We want to keep it rooted and really lengthen the spine on the side of the body. And then we'll inhale back to center, exhale to release that arm. So we notice in yoga that the body craves balance. So you might be really, really feeling that left side needing to move now. So we'll inhale, lifting that left arm, again, keeping the shoulder rooted in its socket. And then on the exhalation, take the body in a crescent shape toward the right. So again, breathe deeply and feel how your body is feeling in this moment. As you're moving in this direction, you're creating space in the left side body. And so really those intercostal muscles between the ribs are stretching and expanding, giving you even more room for breath. So breathe into those spaces. And then inhale, come back to center, release that arm as you exhale. Next, we'll be moving forward and back with the spine. So simply, you can place your hands on your knees, take an inhale and take the belly forward and the heart forward, the head up if that's comfortable for your neck. And maybe you feel the tailbone sliding back. So you're arching the back, or not arching the back, but curving the back. And then as you exhale, round out. This is arching the back, taking the chin toward the chest. Maybe the tailbone tucks under. Your shoulders might come forward a little. And then inhale again. So you're going to be looking up, sending the tailbone back, the shoulders back and down. And exhale, coming into that arched back position. You just do another round at your own pace, following your own breath. And then we'll meet up back into our neutral spine position before we take the twisting position, if that's also comfortable and accessible for you. So for this, again, lengthen the spine as you inhale, and you can take your right hand, place it on your left knee. And as you exhale, just twist the body, gazing gently over that left shoulder. So we're not forcing this twist. We're not pulling ourselves too deeply if that doesn't feel comfortable. As you inhale, the spine will continue to lengthen, and as you exhale, maybe you'll twist a little more deeply. Even the gaze is turning toward the left. Then we're going to inhale, coming back to center, and exhale right onto the other side. So then we're twisting the body toward the right, gazing over the right shoulder, and breathing. We'll inhale, coming back to center. And as before, take a moment in this neutral position, maybe close your eyes and tune into how you're feeling. How does your body feel in this moment? How does your breath feel? Are you breathing more deeply, more slowly? And what's the quality of your mind? Hopefully, in these simple breathing exercises, the simple observation or mindfulness exercises, and in the simple movement exercises, you're finding yourself with a little bit more sense of tranquility and peace and balance.
Thank you. I just did a real quick check of the chat, and I see that someone says breathing made me realize how tense my muscles were. So it increases an increase in awareness just simply by breathing. So, so thank you. Now let's turn to next steps, and we will return to Minty. So if you will, go back to that browser. Oh boy, that is not quite what I wanted you to see. It wouldn't be right if there wasn't some minor technical glitch, right? There we are. Okay. I'm gonna breathe through the technical glitch. Okay. Thumbs up if you can see the Minty. Thank you. So now, what will you practice tomorrow moving forward for increased balance, peace, and tranquility? Ah. Walking. I see we love the breathing. I do too. Stretching, deep breathing, self-compassion, being kind to yourself. Some of the saying no, some of what you're already identifying are some of the recommendations that are in the resources that we have for you at the end of this presentation. So I'm glad you're already thinking along those lines. Reading. I love to laugh, much laughter, big belly laughs. And sometimes when I laugh, many times when I laugh, I also cry a little, so that I consider that part of the whole cleansing process too. The laughter is cleansing and the little moisture in my eyes is cleansing. Very nice. Napping. A true disconnection from it all. Is to go into sleep land. Not smoking. Okay. Very nice. Thank you. Taking breaks. Yeah. I imagine that we've all heard of taking a sort of a 10 or 15-minute, 20-minute power nap can be more energizing than having a long sleep. So I love the napping, taking breaks, disconnecting from being too much in your head, especially around work stuff. And by taking a break in whatever way that is, whether it's napping, stretching, breathing, meditating, actually improves your effectiveness when you return to those tasks.
I like your idea, Richmond, that you schedule in do nothing time during your
That-
day. Put that on your calendar. And I think that's a valuable
Absolutely.
practice.
Yes, absolutely. It is no thingness, being in the space of no thingness.
And how much time do you allow in each little section of nothingness on your calendar?
It varies. So putting it on my calendar, it usually just shows up as an hour, but I may take more than that. I may take less than that. I don't pressure myself when I'm doing no thing. I sort of am guided by the moment. So I do. So for instance, over the break, the holiday break, we were in our department talking about what our plans were for the break before we came back in January. And that was it. My thing was to do nothing intentionally. And that's exactly what I did. So what that looked like was there were days when I woke up and I decided I wanted to go for a ride. And that's what I did. So that still, in my mind, is part of no thingness because it wasn't planned ahead of time. I didn't have a defined date or route to take. And I just decided in that moment, I felt inspired to get in my car and I happened to have a convertible so I could let the top down. Feel
Nice.
the air, bro, all over
Well,
my.
I think that's a great lesson for all of us, that self-care can be intuitive and
Yeah.
can be spontaneous, and that it doesn't need to be anything extravagant or expensive or necessarily elaborately planned. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the elaborate planning actually repeats part of the stress that brings us to this point in the first place.
good.
Walking through walls. I love that one. Walking through walls. I want to talk more about that, but I think we probably have to move on to questions and comments.
Yes. So if you'll
Thank
stop your
you.
share, I will share the resources that we have for everyone. There we go. So these are just some resources that you can access online, different ways to engage in social justice through self-care, self-care in the face of racial stress, self-care as social justice. And I also want to point to the next one on the list, the Koru mindfulness course that Dr. Sarah Mattice leads. So that's available to I know to UNF students, faculty, and staff, and she can talk a little bit more about that. But, you know, we also have these resources, as I said, that don't cost anything. We have the great outdoors. We have, if you are a churchgoer or you are a member of an affinity group or a certain community that you find feeds you and nourishes you in these ways that are so essential, then spend additional time in those areas, in those places, so that in those communities, so that you can get the care that you need. I also wanted to address a question that was in the chat. Yes, all of the justice sessions are recorded, and so they are available to everyone online at the Justice Sessions homepage after the fact. So I don't know how long it's going to take to upload today's presentation, but it will be there available along with all of the others at some point. So please check back there.
Okay. Oh, great. So it looks like we're adding some of these, the links in the chat as well. I just want to say, especially the first 3 or 4, there are multiple links on some of these pages that, again, provide some head stuff kinds of suggestions. Again, we focus on the body, mind, spirit connection today, but there are some more concrete examples. The compass points of view. I linked to the blog here, but it's an entire website of resources for self-care, for social justice, and then other pages on organizing and So a lot of different resources there.
Thank you. So I will stop the share so everyone can see us well again. If there are any, Dr. Matthijs, if you'd like to share information about your mindfulness class, that would be great. I don't know if there are any questions or
Sure, thank you. And thank you so much, Dr. Leverette and Dr. Wynn. This has been really a wonderful pause in our day, and hopefully recharging and setting us up for good renewal for our continuing activities. As Dr. Leverette mentioned, I'm a certified meditation teacher. I teach in a program called Koru, which was designed at Duke University. It's an evidence-based mindfulness and meditation program. We do have, it's a 4-week, once a week class, and we do have one starting actually tonight. So if you're interested, it ended up sort of by happenstance, but happy happenstance to work out this way. I did drop a link to that in the chat. There are still several spots available. So please, I hope that any of you who might be interested in exploring some of the kinds of practices that we did today and some other kinds of practices that you'll join us. It's a secular program, so anybody and everybody is welcome. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm hoping maybe we can get some questions going in the chat for Drs. Leverette and Wynn. Don't be shy.
If there aren't questions, if you would like to share a reaction to today's session, some of you already have. So if you'd like to just share your reaction to today's session, that would be acceptable as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Getting a lot of gratitude.
Thank you all. That's a healthy practice as well. The gratitude, looking for the good, especially in the midst of the stressors and the challenges and the injustice that we see in the world. So I think that's a good reminder to all of us to also be on the lookout for all of those things that are sustaining, that are that fill us with that sense of gratitude, because then we can keep going.
Exactly.
I can also point out one more resource that just came in my email today. So UNF's International Studies program is offering a creative coping studio. I saw that they're offering on the 12th, which would be Friday, right? I believe that's Friday from 1:30 to 2:30. So although I don't have the link handy to put in the chat for anyone, but it sounds like another resource in terms of finding ways to cope with the stressors that we're facing. So you could check that out on the UNF, do a search on the UNF homepage.
Yes. Thank you. Invigorating. I love that.
Yes, great. Well, good. Yes, we don't want to feel stressed by our calendars and our timeline either.
Right. Very nice.
Well,
I think if we don't have any more questions, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up this meeting of the Justice session. So thank you everyone for taking the time to be here with us this afternoon. And thank you, Drs. Leverette and Wynn, for sharing with us.
And thank you, Dr. Matthijs. And I just want to, just one last mention, don't forget self-care on Valentine's Day this year. So be well, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.